There's a voice in my head that gets loud whenever I slow down. The second I rest, she's there. You're being lazy. You're not doing enough. Everyone else is moving, and you're just sitting here wasting it. And for years, I did one of two things. I either believed her and spiraled into guilt, or I tried to drown her out with busy work I didn't even care about, just to make her shut up. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize she wasn't actually wrong. There usually was something I was avoiding, but the word she used, lazy, that was a lie. Because I wasn't lazy, I was scared. And calling myself lazy was easier than admitting that. So today, I want to talk about the meanest person you know, the one who lives in your head rent free, where she comes from, why she's so vicious, and why the answer isn't to believe her, and it isn't to silence her either. You're listening to How to Live with Care. This is the show about becoming who you're trying to be without pretending the process is clean. I have a lot of conversations with myself, typically when I'm journaling or meditating, whatever it may be, where I'm just trying to take the time to listen to that voice in my head to really try and understand what she's saying. And that's always been really difficult for me because that voice in my head is just so mean. She's like my biggest bully, I would say. And through my journey of mental health and trying to just become the best version of myself possible, I thought that the best route would be to just ignore her, to try and just push her away, just to pretend like she's not here. And every time she started to get a little bit too loud, I would have to find something to kind of silence her. I'd have to talk to a friend. I'd have to doom scroll on Instagram or TikTok, or I'd have to go weightlift. And I find myself a lot of the times when I am especially doom scrolling, it gets so bad sometimes. It's always because that inner critic in my head is being so loud, and I don't know what her problem is. And so for the past few weeks, I've really been trying to settle down, settle my brain down, and just sit there and think. And actually take the time to listen to her and try to just comprehend her. And of course, I always have to start with the why. Why is she there? Where did she even come from? I used to think that that voice in my head was 100% me. It was all me. That's how I viewed myself until I started to reframe it in a different light. So I want to share that with you guys today. This inner critic, they've been there with us all along, but where do they even come from? And I'm going to attempt to explain the origin of your inner critic so that I can lower all of the shame that you put on yourself, that I put on myself for basically no reason. Your inner critic isn't proof you're broken. She's a recording of every voice that's ever judged you, played back on repeat in your head over and over again. And it took me a long time to come to terms with this, and I'm still trying to understand. But when I was reflecting back on my childhood, because that's where everything always starts, I was thinking about my journey as an athlete. For anybody that knows me, I've been an athlete my entire life, and my main sport, the sport that filled almost 90% of my childhood, was gymnastics. And if you've never done gymnastics before, you should know that this is one of the most mentally challenging sports because not only do you have to find the courage to flip your body voluntarily across a 4-inch piece of wood up in the air, but you're also subjecting yourself to the coaches, the judges, constantly there criticizing you. Every millimeter of me was scored at all times. My body, my form, my face. And I think about this one story. It's kind of funny. It's an inside joke between me and my parents where I had this one coach and he was just on my head nonstop. Your toes aren't pointed. Your knees aren't bent. Why are you scared? I have always been so scared. So anxious. I was like maybe 3 feet tall, being told to jump to the high bar, and I just couldn't do it. And I had this coach just sitting there yelling over and over again. And I just looked at him and I go, "You're not my dad." And that's just kind of the vibe that I brought to a practice with me, is I've always been one to kind of talk back. And that's just a funny story that I like to share every time I talk about my history with gymnastics. But off top of my head, I could probably think of about 2 coaches that I had that just left left me in tears every single practice. Every mistake I made, if I started to look a little bit too sad, if I looked a little too scared, constant yelling. And I get it to an extent. You want to be stern with them. You want to tell them, I am confident in you that you can do this. And I'm going to tell you all the reasons why you should be doing this. So I get it. And I'm not saying all coaches are bad, but more times than not, they kind of can be. And I realized after reflecting on my journey through gymnastics and even into diving as well, kind of like the same sport, just one on land and one in the water, I realized that this inner critic, this judge, this mean coach that I had was embedded into my brain. And it was no longer about gymnastics. It was no longer about diving. It suddenly became a part of every single aspect of my life. And anyone who's raised under a scoreboard knows this. They know this feeling. They know it. They feel it in their body. And through my time studying psychology, I found a term and it really resonated with me. It's called socially prescribed perfectionism, which essentially is internalizing this sense that everyone is demanding perfection and then you have to do their job for them. So I now have this deeply rooted belief in me that others are demanding flawless performance, and my entire self-worth depends on those perceived expectations. And to make things even harder for us in our generation now with the rise of technology, the rise of social media, we are growing up being scored in ways our past generations never were. Now we're being scored by an algorithm, highlight reels, 24/7 surveillance. So of course our inner voice is louder than ever before. We have this constant need to live up to these perfect expectations that honestly nobody really even placed on us in the first place. Maybe in a specific area, like me doing a back layout on the floor, but that was never supposed to be about my self-worth. So whenever my inner critic voice becomes loud, it's really important for me to take a step back and I have to ask myself, who does this voice sound like? And for you or for me, it could be a coach, a parent, a teacher, a comment section. Because honestly, guys, half of the power comes from thinking that that voice is you. And most times she's not. She's just a tenant in your mind who's never moved out and honestly was never even invited to live there in the first place. So being able to label the origin of this voice in my mind and being able to label it outside of me and who I am as a person has helped me so much to realize that I don't need all of this pressure on myself. But then I started to realize, what if this voice actually is doing me some good? Just because it's saying something I don't like doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad for me. And so I went into the next step. Okay, I know the origin of these critics. How can I distinguish between what's worth listening to and what's just straight up bullying? So we're going to break this down and I'm going to give the framework of two different people because two people can raise their voice at you and I'm going to call them a coach and a troll. And these two people can raise their voice at you, but they are not the same, even when they are both screaming at you at the same time. So on one side here, we have the coach. A coach, they point at your form. Your elbow dropped on the landing. Your knees were bent. Your feet were flexed in the air. These are specific critiques about the thing that we actually did. And honestly, a lot of the time, it really stings. It's really hard to take criticism, especially when we're trying to give it to ourselves, because shouldn't I have known to do it correctly in the first place if I can tell myself it's wrong afterwards? But even though it stings, we can take notes. We can accept the criticism because we know that it is a valuable correction. You're right, coach. My feet weren't pointed. I'm really upset that they weren't, but now I know since you told me, this next pass that I do on the floor, I'm going to make sure that my toes are as pointed as possible. And I'm going to keep trying over and over again. It's really easy to understand what this means when you're thinking of it in a playful term of, oh yes, my past in gymnastics. But I have to think about who I am now. What are things I struggle with now? What is this voice telling me now? And for me personally, one of my biggest struggles is completing tasks. Like this podcast right now. I am doing this literally right before it has to be done. I've had all of the time in the world to do it, but for some reason, my brain is like, we are going to wait until the last minute to get something done. And from the point when I knew I should have done it until right now, I have been calling myself so many mean names in my head. I'm lazy. I'm not disciplined. If you wanted to do it, then you would. And it's just this constant back and forth in my head to the point where I can't even focus to sit down to even think about what I'm supposed to be doing. And so what do? I go on my phone. I give myself a good scroll. 40, 50 minutes go by in a blink of an eye, and boom, I'm right back to hating on myself 10 times worse now because I now have willingly wasted 50 minutes of valuable time. And what took me a really long time to understand, and obviously I'm still struggling with it, is that voice in my head, the voice calling me lazy, she was right. Underneath that mean way of explaining it, she was right. She was pointing at something real. I was avoiding this because of fear of rejection, fear of not making sense to anybody. But I kept calling myself lazy. It was just a label, a cheap label that I applied to myself. That's my coach. On the other hand, we have a troll. Now, the troll attacks who you are. You suck. You're ugly. You're unlovable. You're unfunny. There's absolutely no information to back this up. It's just bullying. And whenever we talk about a troll, we think about online, the comment trolls, the people in the comment sections where no matter what you do, no matter the progress you make, there is always going to be somebody there making fun of you for something you probably can't control or something that you are actively working on. And their comment is of no value. It is doing nothing besides trying to put you down and bring you down to their level. And it's really easy to want to engage with these trolls because we have something to prove. But the key to winning with a troll is not arguing with them, because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, you will never get the approval of a troll. They are simply not capable of giving you that approval. So the only thing that you can do that's good for you is to block them. You block their ability to make these troll comments about who you are. So whenever that voice starts to get a little too loud for you, you have to take a step back and you have to say, is this a coach or is this a troll? And a key way to tell is that a coach talks about what you did. A troll talks about who you are. Something I did, I can take the note and I'll do my best to do that next time. Something about who I am, I'm going to send that energy back and I am blocking it because it is doing nothing productive for me besides putting me down. And I really hope that that wasn't confusing because I might confuse you here because, guys, I have to say, there is such thing as something worse than a troll. There is a troll in a coach's jacket. The most dangerous trick your inner critic pulls is what I call concern trolling. It's a troll dressed as a coach. The quote, I'm just being honest, ... You'd feel better about yourself if you just fixed yada yada yada. It sounds like a note, it sounds like a criticism, but it comes with a huge to-do list. It looks like you need to eat less, you need to change your body, you need to shrink yourself. And so our brain sees these criticisms and it files it under this coaching. But I want to say it's not coaching. A real coach never puts your worth on the line. She talks about your work, never your value. The second that voice starts to say you're ugly and then hands you a workout plan, that's the troll in costume. And you have to do what you would do with any other troll. You block them. Because for this specific example of your body and wanting to take care of your body, wanting to make changes, that is about care. That is coming from care for yourself. It's never supposed to come from a voice calling you ugly. The tell is always the source. If the goal is to make your voice shut up inside of your head, you're not improving. You're simply obeying the troll. So we now have the origin of our inner critic. We're starting to be able to find out where this voice is coming from this person in the past, from this person recently. We now know how to distinguish between the troll, the coach, and then the troll acting like a coach. What do we actually do whenever we are able to distinguish between these labels? So when it's the coach, like I said earlier, we take the note. We don't believe exactly what she's saying to us, but we don't silence her either. We simply translate her. I feel like I've been told many, many times you either have to believe the voice or you have to silence her. And there's never a real deep explanation on what this voice is, why does it exist, why is it here. And so once I was able to break it down into these two sections, I was like, okay, now I have my coach. I know this person's trying to help me. What am I supposed to do? Believe that I'm lazy constantly? Or just try and ignore her too? Just pretend that I'm fine all the time? I don't know about you, but I still felt like crap even if I tried to silence that voice. So once I realized that I needed to translate her, everything just fell into place and it suddenly all made sense for me because the note is real. The delivery is the crime. I feel like I see this a lot even in discussions or arguments, if that's what you want to call it, or conflict, where what the person is actually trying to say genuinely makes sense and they genuinely have a point. But because they delivered it in such a horrendous way, for whatever reason, you're no longer focusing on their core message or why they're even speaking up in the first place. Suddenly, it all becomes about dissecting. I didn't like your tone. I didn't like that you used that word. I didn't like that you said it at this volume. Why'd you have to say that now? Couldn't you have waited? But it never actually comes back to what they were really talking about in the first place. And honestly, that's because a bad coach's worst habit is the label. It's that one word that turns a thing that you did into a thing that you are. This reminded me of the research that I had done on my own thinking, which is cognitive distortions, which there are a ton of different cognitive distortions. There's labeling, that black or white, all or nothing thinking, mind reading, and mine typically comes in the all or nothing aspect. The you always do this. You're always lazy. You're always failing at things. And it's like I either have to be a failure or I have to be the most successful woman in the entire world. And for a long time, this thinking ruled my coach and ruled my inner critic. But little did I know, just like almost every problem that you could possibly ever have, there's a fancy psychology word that you could slap onto it to make it make complete sense. And then you realize, oh my gosh, the way that I'm thinking isn't even that unique. Almost everybody else thinks this way, which is probably why there's enough research to even be able to come up with a name like this. Being able to take a bad habit of mine and place it into a 1 or 2 word phrase that has scientific research to back it up not only makes me feel a little bit silly that you could sum every problem that I've ever had up into like a word or two that somebody else has already understood, but it also helps ground me, which is why I like to reiterate, hey, whatever problem you have going on, there's a word for it. So that inner critic in your voice saying you're lazy when in reality you just didn't start whatever it was you need to start because you're avoiding it, you're just simply labeling it wrong through a cognitive distortion. But now comes the hard part. I have a coach. She's saying something really mean to me, but it's probably true. It's probably just presenting itself through a cognitive distortion. How am I actually supposed to translate whatever criticism this is supposed to be? And the simplest way to do this is to find the label. Find that word that it is continuously throwing at you. And then you have to ask yourself, what is the truer, more vulnerable word underneath it? Because lazy is often what a perfectionist like me will say instead of, I'm scared that I won't be good enough. Because that harsh word of lazy is a whole lot easier to accept than the honest one, as funny as that sounds. And honestly, guys, that's the ego. That's the ego at hand here, giving us a meaner, simpler truth to protect us from the exposed one, our genuine self. We are protecting ourselves by giving us this generic word that really doesn't even hold any meaning for us. Because unfortunately, I don't know if it's just the way I came out the womb, or if it's because of gymnastics, or I don't know what it is, but I am most definitely a perfectionist. Even with this podcast, I have started and restarted and deleted and started, and it almost feels like nothing is ever good enough. And so I just kept telling myself over and over again, you're lazy, you're lazy, you're lazy, you never get anything done, you always do this. But in reality, I just had to accept I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think that what I'm saying is good enough. And it was really hard to fully accept the fact that that's what I've been thinking about myself. But since I've been able to accept the fact that I don't think I'm good enough a lot of the time, now I'm able to build myself back up and actually find ways to combat that instead of just trying to combat that generic word of lazy. So whenever I start to tell myself, you're so lazy, you're wasting your time, I then remind myself, I haven't started the thing that matters to me. And I think that's because I'm scared. And I think that's worth looking at. It's the same exact criticism, the same note, but minus the cruelty, and it's actually coachable. So that is how I translate my coach. Now, when we have the troll, she's a little bit harder to get rid of. We have to remember that the trolls we cannot take notes from. It is of no value for us. There is nothing that we can do to act on it. It is simply a verdict for us to refuse. And I want to simplify this by the two words of shame and guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. And with guilt, we can do something to repair something that we have done. But shame says, I am bad. That is honestly linked to more avoidance and less change. A troll deals mainly in shame, and it skips the behavior and goes straight for your identity. It's really difficult to block a troll because the troll feels opposite of our ego. But she is the same exact armor trying to protect us. She says the cruelest things about us first, so no one outside can get there before her. And I do this to myself constantly. If I call myself ugly, if I call myself stupid, if I call myself unlovable, and I genuinely think that about myself, if it ever happens that somebody else says this, at least I saw it coming. At least I protected myself from this feeling before somebody else got the chance. But honestly, that's not protection. That's the same fear, just wearing an even meaner face. I struggle with that part a lot. I am so mean to myself because I feel like it's going to protect me from other people, when in reality, I'm just wasting a lot of my time and a lot of my strength trying to fight myself when most of the people out in the world wouldn't have even hurt me in that way in the first place. So whenever we do figure out, okay, this is the troll talking back to me, they're saying I'm ugly, they're saying I'm unlovable, I have to step back and I have to ask myself, whose voice is this? And one way that I really ground myself and really puts things in perspective for me is I ask myself, would I ever say this to my best friend? If you are saying something hateful to yourself, run it through that screening and say, hey, would I say this to my best friend's face? And if you wouldn't say this to your best friend, then that is not your voice to keep repeating about yourself either. You name the troll, you send it away, and you block it. And here's why this matters now more than it ever will again. Your 20s are when the cement of your life and who you are is still wet. Every time you let a troll convince you I am ugly, instead of catching it as someone taught me to see myself that way, you're not having a bad day. You are pressing a brick into the identity you'll stand on for the next decade, for the next rest of your life. And this is the highest stakes time in your life to learn that difference. Our habits are starting now. And if we keep putting them off, we're going to be 50, 60, maybe we'll have future children, future grandchildren, and we are going to instill that voice into them too. So just to provide ourselves a little bit of self-compassion here, taking the coach's note and blocking the troll is not going soft on yourself. It's simply being accurate, because a good coach is honest and they are never cruel. You can be that coach for yourself instead of your own troll. You have the power. If you had the power to give that troll a platform in your mind to say these things, then you also have the power to take it away. Honestly, guys, one thing I love about doing this podcast is even though I am journaling and I'm coming up with things that I want to talk about, things I want to share, I'm doing my research, I'm still struggling with this. Today was an incredibly difficult day for me because of the inner critic in my mind. And being able to go back through my journal, being able to share my thoughts, my feelings, and my research with you guys, it helps ground me and it helps remind me I am so much better than I was months ago, years ago. I am so much better now than I was when I was like 16, 17 years old in high school. And that's something that I also want you guys to reflect on as well. Because we keep constantly moving the bar up and up and up for ourselves, and that's great. But it's also really important to take the time to reflect and realize all of the hard work that you have done to get you where you are now. And even though we still struggle a little bit, we have our setbacks, at the end of the day, progress is not linear. You're going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. But overall, the trend of that graph is going up. So I love giving you guys some homework because you can listen to something, you can listen to me yap all day, but sometimes it's not going to do anything for you until you actually implement some changes into your life. So here's your homework for this week. I want you to catch your inner critic once. Find your one time. And when you hear that mean voice in your head, I want you to write down exactly what she said, verbatim, the mean word and all. And I want you to read that sentence a few times and ask yourself, is this a coach or a troll? Is she pointing at something I did, which is the coach, or attacking who I am, which is the troll? If it's a coach, you circle the label. And once you circle the label, you have to reflect, find the true word under it. A lot of times it's going to be scared, tired, hurt, unsure, all of those uncomfortable feelings. And once you figure out the true word, rewrite the note like you would say that to a friend that you love. If it's a troll, ask whose voice that actually is. And if you can think of who it is, even if it's a gymnastics coach that you had when you were 5 years old, you write that name down, you fold it up, and you throw it away. You don't fix it. You just stop pretending that that voice is even yours. And you're just going to do this one time. That's the whole assignment. The goal isn't to feel better in the moment. It's to stop taking notes from trolls and stop blocking the one coach who is actually trying to help. And that's the work this week. Take the note when she's coaching, block her when she's trolling, and never, ever, ever let anybody talk to you like that, even yourself. I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, live with care.